The prosecution and defense have finished giving their closing arguments.
Well, now it's time for the jury to deliberate and decide whether Ted DiBiase Jr. is innocent or guilty. He's accused of stealing millions of your tax dollars. The money was supposed to help needy families here in the state. Former pro wrestler is charged with money laundering, theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy in the state's largest embezzlement scandal.
3 on Your Side's Quentin Smith has been following this story for us, gavel to gavel.
And he is live at the courthouse right now to tell you what happened today. Quentin?
That's right, Howard. Those closing arguments just wrapped up roughly 15 minutes ago. Both the defense and prosecution spoke for more than 2 hours apiece, trying to make one last impression on the jury. Now, the defense admits DiBiase did receive nearly $3 million, but they maintain he did legitimate work to earn those dollars. However, during closing arguments, the prosecution said DiBiase is a con man, and they describe him as a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, according to the prosecution, DiBiase received 6 bogus contracts, and they say he used money from those contracts to buy a $1 million home, a boat, and a truck, among other things. According to prosecutors, John Davis ordered 2 nonprofits to steer money and contracts to DiBiase. You may remember, Davis is the former head of the Department of Human Services, and he has already pleaded guilty in this scandal. The prosecution says DiBiase showered Davis with friendship and companionship, and in return, Davis showered DiBiase with your tax dollars. However, the defense continues to fight back. They say the former pro wrestler did commercials, speaking engagements, and conducted trainings, which they say is proof DiBiase did legitimate work. The defense also argues the contracts never stated how the money could be spent, and they maintain the 43-year-old did not steal any money. Now, the jurors, they just went to the back to begin deliberations. Of course, we will continue to follow this story for you, and once a verdict is reached, we will be sure to keep you posted both on air and online at WLBT.com. But for right now, that's the very latest from here outside the federal courthouse in Jackson. Quentin Smith, 3 on Your Side.